Today is Tuesday, November 2nd, and you're listening to the Beer Temple Podcast.
Remember this is what we wanted. Remember this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again. Remember this is what we wanted. Remember this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again.
Hello, and welcome to the Beer Temple Podcast. I'm your co-host, Mike Shalau from Is Was Brewing. I'm here with my other co-host, Chris Quinn of the Beer Temple. Chris, how you doing?
What's up? I like how we got to turn that off. Interesting.
Already technical difficulties, less than a minute.
Yeah.
Well, that's
just
fine.
moments in. But I do like how Serge ultimately just points to where the fade is going, and then we just have to respond. So let's see as Serge gets us all corrected there. I literally
get ready,
don't know
people.
how to
We
fix it.
we have our first digital
Guest
phone-in guest
in the
Studio BT.
Yeah.
It's very exciting.
So exciting.
Yeah, there she is.
I didn't realize.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Let's
So
get into
cool.
it. Kate Bernot. Kate Bernot it's Bernot, correct? Or Bernot?
It's Bernot.
Bernot. Okay, it's Bernot, right? Not Bernot?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
It is.
It's
but
not
I
the
don't
way you
correct
think you would
anyone.
pronounce it.
Yeah.
That's how I
Hardly
think about it.
ever.
Well, that's probably why I thought it was Bernot.
Too
Thank
darn
you.
polite.
Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Of course. Thanks for having me. It has been a long time, and it
a
is
bit.
really nice to talk to everyone, and makes me miss Chicago real bad.
Oh yeah, it's a great city. How have you been? What's going on?
I've been good. I've been busy. I live in Montana now and have for a few years, which still feels
Yeah,
kind of
you've been there
wild.
for a bit.
But it's wonderful out here. And luckily, I get to come back to Chicago a decent amount. I was there in August. And it was really nice to be back. But yeah, I miss it a lot. Miss the food, miss the beer.
Yeah.
Send me tacos.
We're very
Please.
spoiled. I had tacos and beer right before this, so
Really
You're
rubbing
doing
it
it
in.
right.
Yeah, right. No tacos in Montana. Oh well.
Not any tacos worth talking about on this fine podcast.
Okay.
What
I'm
is
sure
there worth talking about in Montana in this fine podcast?
Big Sky, baby.
Big Sky. Moose Drool?
Moose Drool, lots of Scotch ales.
Scotch.
Oh, I meant
Hey.
just like,
So-
the land of Big Sky.
So basically, it's Chris's paradise. A lot of Scotch ales, probably a lot of ESBs, a lot of like German lagers.
just going back in time to when
Exactly.
I approved of the styles
Right.
that were out there.
when you were a beer evangelist, according
Yes.
to the Chicago Tribune, and beer.
Am I really?
And beer Messiah. No, that year when you were beer
Oh,
Messiah and
yeah.
beer evangelist, whereas
Yes.
a weird sweep of.
I don't know if I was beer
quasi-religious
Messiah.
categories of
I think
Chicago.
I was
That
evangelist and high priest.
That's weirder than Messiah, I think.
I don't know. Messiah? I mean, being called the Messiah.
It more
is-
aligns with how you think of yourself.
Well, I mean, I think you're describing how you think I think of myself.
Right.
But-
As does everyone in the listenership,
Yeah, yeah.
I think. Okay, thank you for coming on.
Yeah.
And
Well,
we're
we
all-
went out of order, so you've already broken with tradition.
Oh.
That's totally okay.
Yeah, I didn't have the outline in front of me.
Yeah. And we
I
also
was
should
just-
do an
I was just
introduction,
going
right?
with vibe. Yeah.
Yeah. So we should thank everyone for listening. We should thank Lumpen Radio for having us on, and thanks Serge for being here.
Sorry, I'm very unthankful.
Yeah. And thanks to Jamie and the powers that be at Lumpen for having us on. No thanks to Edmar, who was supposed to come on and flaked on us last
Well,
second.
he forgot that it's not downstairs from his house anymore.
Right, exactly. I keep telling him he needs to move onto the roof of the beer temple.
Yeah. I thought he was
so
last
he can
time.
just
There's a
rappel
little
down.
crawl space up there. We don't know what's gone up there. I'm
true.
sure he can game up there.
He probably will and will crawl awkwardly out of that
He
space.
might be and not even know.
Yeah. But yeah, this is cool. We have our first. It's a round table. We're doing a round table today, and we've got our regular. This is one of the most kind of normal setups we've had, where there's somebody calling in. We've got somebody in person who we should probably get to introducing.
That's where I was going. I'm sorry. Just jump the gun.
Go for it.
Hot take, Jake Guidry, Hopewell Brewing. How you doing?
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Great.
Good? We good? I
don't
looking
know.
at the blank stare?
Just like
What, do you run the podcast now? You
yeah,
ask the
hey,
questions?
what's up?
Hey.
I'm
Probably should, I guess.
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. It's good to be back, and I'm glad to be here for the kind of OG format. I know the last time I was on, we had a more different format, which was great, but I'm glad to kind of chop it up and talk some stuff.
Yeah, man.
What's new in the Hopewell-averse?
Oh, we're starting to do a little bit of expansion into new markets, which has been exciting. I'm kind of helping lead that up, so we can make it official. We just got our license to distribute in Texas, so we're starting that up. Hopefully by the end of the year, that's the goal. We're starting to ramp up New York. We're looking at some other markets, which has been exciting. And then here, just this time of year is very much focused on seasonals. It's the time of the seasonal, kind of starting with Oktoberfest and then transitioning into winter styles, holiday stuff, et cetera, et cetera. So, but we kind of have a nice locked-in portfolio, so I'm really excited to kind of just show those things. And there are beers we've brewed before, so there's this sort of base of knowledge with accounts that we already work with. So yeah, it's a fun time of year, I think.
I'm bringing things back to what you were saying before in styles that I approve of, and you're just totally playing to people's misperceptions of me out there.
I'm an agent of chaos, Chris.
It's true. People come in, and if they see it's happened, Steven's told me, like, people come in and they see that there's a hazy on, and they're like, Chris allows you to have hazies on? He hates hazies. And it's like, I think there's a caricature of him out there.
If it was just the beers you wanted, it would just be Scratch's Tap Room. That's all
probably it was probably true. But that's where I was going. Not necessarily Scratch's Tap Room, but there would definitely be a bitter of some kind on cask. Mm-hmm. And since Jake was on last, we actually had a Hopewell bitter on cask. Yeah. And it was really good. So
I was telling you that I rarely drink two of the same beer in a row here because you have such a great tap list, and that was belly up on cask.
That's high praise. I appreciate it.
Bang two of them in a row.
Mm-hmm. We've been having fun doing those styles the last year. It took some kind of convincing, but I think the time right now is people are really responding to those styles. We did an English style porter, did an 80 shilling. The ESB has been really popular. And we're just going to keep going with that. Like, not flood the market with those things, but especially now that bars are back open, there's a huge market for those styles of beer to fill a slot on a list, because every other breweries come to them with, let's say 3 to 4 different styles. But if you can kind of slot in something that's a bit of a throwback, but is also really good, that's like kind of a win-win. And it gets people trying some styles that maybe they haven't had in a long time. And especially with like the way that supply chain, all that stuff's going on, you can't get a lot of these styles where they originated from in the market anymore. So I know a lot of people are having a hard time getting certain Belgian beers, English beers, et cetera. They're not even in the market. So we're having a fun time trying to recreate those styles, and people seem to be digging them. So
that's cool. I was talking with Doug Valicki, a.k.a. the Beer Cruncher, a.k.a. Beer Aficionado.
You might have more gnomes to beer than I do now.
He's in the running, but I think you got him. But he was saying they put on their Working Man mild on cask at the brew pub, and some of the staff were a little apprehensive because they're like, I don't think we need one, because they weren't gonna, I think, put one on originally there. They were just gonna send them out to accounts, and they put it on, and it went, I think, in the same day, or maybe in a matter of hours or something like that, through a whole cask. I mean, that's right. Pretty fast.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, maybe it's been long enough since people have seen anything on cask at this point that they're just ready to explore. There's probably a whole bunch of people who've gotten into craft beer who've never had something on cask at this point.
I think it's also one of the few like explicitly out of your house at a place with other people drinking experiences you can have for beer. Like draft beer
Can't
is
do that at home.
meant to taste like the same thing you had in the can. Like, but cask beer is not. It's like a whole different animal. So I told Jake like right before I came and had those belly ups, and even though it was going to be on, I was having a conversation with my friends about how like I want to have cask beer. Like I didn't go out and seek it out like pre-pandemic specifically, but like when I was like I haven't had a beer on cask in probably 3 or 4 years,
Right.
and so I'm like I was craving it.
Funny.
in a weird, strange way. But
Curious to see if it goes past novelty, or if it's just novelty, or if it has a little bit of staying power. I'm curious because your cast did really well.
I think the interesting aspect of it is like Mike was kind of alluding to is that it's bar only, which pre-COVID that was fairly common, but since then everyone's pretty much packaging every single thing that they make, with the exception of like small brew pubs. For somewhere like Hopewell, though, we have beers. Everything we make goes out to market. So, but now with the success of these beers, we're looking at, okay, how do we recreate, maybe not do cask, but how do we recreate this experience by having draft only beer that hits the market that's specifically designed for like that pub drinking experience? And it's something that only bars have like locally in Chicago. I know that's like not a new idea, but trying to go back to that sort of.
You can do that a little bit with nitro too. I've been beating that drum for a while, but when I was in Scotland most recently, there was a definite change from when I was in the UK the last time, where there was draft beer and cask beer, and now there's draft beer, cask beer, and draft beer trying to imitate cask beer by being nitro, and it being like bitters, English pales, Scottish ales, stuff like that on nitro. I didn't see any, that was all the stuff that I saw on nitro, and people were drinking it because it is a pretty good equivalent of cask, and it is it's more or less, it's much more a at home. I mean, I'm out at the pub thing. There are ways of packaging nitro, but it's not the same. It's just not the same.
Right. And it's very cost intensive for smaller breweries to do.
Kate, what's like your top 2, 3 cask bars in Montana right now?
Rude.
Yeah, I just forgot that other people can't see my face because there was a large eye roll.
You just started counting.
Yeah.
A brewery here in Missoula, Highlander Brewing, which has some flagships that are pretty like styles I don't see all the time. Like they have like an Irish red that I really like. But they had a coffee mild on, man, I feel like
That's
this
cool.
was 2 years ago or something. And I was super excited about it, thought it was delicious, thought the coffee was a really cool component to it. But I felt like no one was ordering it from their tap room. So I went back like twice in 1 week and tried to pretend to be a different person and been like, everyone's talking to me about this mild. Like, I've been hearing amazing thing. And I never saw it again. So my disguise didn't work, but
everyone's talking about it. I had to come
magical. Yeah, like everyone's been, Instagramming me about it, whatever. No, it didn't work. So this all sounds magical, truly.
Well,
what a wonderland.
It's barely here as well. I mean, there's hardly any going on, but we'll see if we can get it back.
Right. To be clear, the only place I had this is that beer. Every corner bar in Chicago now is a cask haven. Like no.
Yeah, I mean, even 10 years ago, there was way more cask available in Chicago than there used to be. I mean, I don't think Sheffield's has theirs going anymore. I don't think Clark Street Ale House has theirs. I'm almost certain Map Room does not have theirs, and I don't think Owen and Engine is open right now, are they?
I wonder if this is part of the kind of second generation of craft beer producer owners thumbing their nose at the previous generation, where the first generation was kind of like, we're recreating classic like English styles and like serving them authentically, and the second generation now like we got all these crazy hops and all these crazy flavors, and so it's like, why would we put anything on cask? I wonder if it will ebb back the other way for at least a small portion of producers.
I don't know. It's hard because people have to have the equipment in their bar
That's
to
a great
do
point.
it. It's going to have to start, I think, as like a Firkin Friday type thing at tap
start
rooms
tap
and kind
rooms
of emanate out from there. But in the meantime, anyone out there who's listening, we have a handful. So
What's on it right now?
we just put on a art history bitter.
Nice.
But we're letting it settle. We're still trying to make sure that the condition's right. So I don't know if we're pouring it.
The true nature
now.
of the publican.
Yeah. So we looked at it. We're talking with them. That's the other thing about cask is
Yeah,
you
so
have to
you're pretty much getting to the issue of why there isn't a ton of cask out there in the market, you know?
Right.
Yeah, like venting it, make sure it's settled. And like if breweries are only doing, like for us, you know, that was our first cask in years, maybe 2 years. And, you know, we have a fairly good idea if it's going to work, but at the same time, it's like we don't do it enough to really know. So we're not going to do 20 casks of this. We're going to go, hey, Beer Temple, we'll do this for you. If it doesn't work, we'll just buy it back from you, whatever. That sort of thing.
As someone who only keg conditions their kegs, I know this struggle.
Yeah.
They're like, why is this one like that? I'm like,
I know your struggle too. I feel your struggle with that. I felt your struggle. Let's go and see what people are drinking, and then I've got yet another actual mailed letter, not handwritten. It's printed out and
still good though.
Yeah, it's typed and printed, but it was mailed. So we'll get to that too. But you been drinking anything or have anything that you enjoyed, or are you looking forward to anything?
Yeah, actually, after the podcast last week, I bought a 4-pack of Goldfinger Pilsner.
Yes.
Brought it home. Didn't like it because it was 2:00 in the morning when I got home, and I shouldn't have been drinking a beer before going to bed anyway. And then I think I texted like I didn't like this at all. And then I had another one a couple days ago, and I texted you. Actually, texted you. Actually, this is pretty great. I did.
Okay.
I really enjoyed the one that I didn't have at 2:00 in the morning, and then I had 2 more.
Cool.
So that I enjoyed that a lot. And don't drink beer out of the can at 2:00 in the morning while watching Succession reruns.
Or
That
do
sounds
that.
great,
That sounds,
though,
yeah.
actually.
It was,
Yeah.
do that. Just don't try to judge the beer
Yeah,
based
yeah.
off of your experience of that.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I know. I remember
I
both
think-
of those conversations.
Doug threw some shade at us for not loving IPAs and Western suburban breweries as much as we should. So I wanted to give some love to the Western suburban breweries, not IPAs though.
There be dragons. I don't know. I don't know where that is. I don't know how to get there. But yeah, no hate. You know, no shade. Just
No,
I
if
don't
we know 2 things about Chris Quinn, it's that he hates IPAs, hazy IPAs, and the Western suburbs.
It's true.
Yeah.
If there's 2 things that I stand for,
Yeah.
I would say those would be the 2
Yeah,
things.
I can't tell you how many times we stayed up late night drinking whiskey at my house, talking about how much you know.
If you know 2 things about me, you know everything.
Yeah,
And that's
how much
I
you
hate
hate
IPAs
and the Western
and I hate the
suburbs.
Western suburbs.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I couldn't name a single one. So, I mean, I don't know how I could hate them. I would probably name one because I just have a combination of Forest, Park, Lincoln.
Nailed one. You got one
you know,
immediately.
Yeah, there you go. I would, and I would be like, okay, there you go.
But yeah,
Maybe throw a Glen in there.
the Goldfinger Pills was good. I wanted
Okay,
to experience it. I did. And
I'm
it
glad.
was it was
glad
good.
you enjoyed it.
Yeah, and you got to give things 2 tries at least.
Okay,
Moral of the story.
all right. How about you, Jake? Anything you've had or looking forward to?
Yeah. So this past weekend, we Hopewell was a part of a Logan Square brewery crawl. Logan Square is the neighborhood that our brewery's in. But we had a fun Halloween brew crawl with some other neighborhood breweries, Solomoth, Mars, Middlebrow, and Orknoy. And I'd had some Orknoy beers, but that was the first time I really got to go in and talk with Johnny, who's kind of running the show over there, and tasting some beers. And I was pretty blown away. I thought the Grodziski, best Grodziski I've ever had. Really, really good stuff. Doing some really cool things, using a lot of Sugar Creek malt, which Mike and I have talked about. We've used it ourselves in some collaboration. And yeah, I definitely want to urge people to get out there because I think they're doing some cool stuff and they have a really fun perspective on beer. I don't want to butcher that by trying to say what that is, but just talking with Johnny was great and really enjoyed the beers.
Cool. Kate, anything that you want to talk about?
A friend of mine so generously shared some beers from Calusa Brewing in Sarasota, Florida, which I had heard good things about and never was able to try. So I had their table saison over the weekend, and that was lovely, like 4%, something like that. And then now I have this Legacy Trail Lager, which is a Czech lager, Czech malt, Czech hops, step mash,
Check.
lovely, Czech, triple Czech. Yeah, it's great. So yeah, I am digging Calusa Brewing from Sarasota, Florida.
All right, there you are.
Very cool.
So this is one that I am genuinely interested to try and excited to. It's also kind of a shill, although kind of not. But I am very interested.
Sponsored content.
Full on shill.
Coming.
Yeah.
Well, it won't be a call to action because it's too late. It's all essentially spoken for. But
You're going to shill something you already sold all of.
Well, it's going to sound like
the
a
worst shill of
It's going
all
to
time.
sound like a shill, but it's not.
Now you're just withholding.
It's the single barrel that we did of the VSOD from Revolution. So we did a barrel pick, and which was a really fun experience. And I have not had it carbonated or kegged. I just had it out of the barrel, which is it's going to taste different now, and I'm very excited. We have it here in the shop, but we're not going to be tasting it until the 13th. We put out pre-sales. We're going to do crowlers just one day, and then it's just going to be all draft that we're going to hold for kind of special events and stuff. And the website kind of messed up. We sold way more.
Messed up.
Way more.
I heard a different narrative from some people that
Something got messed up that's never gotten messed up before. It was probably me trying to do something that we've never done before.
Yeah.
At the same time, the person who told you that, whenever there's these things
Friend
that
of
happen,
the show, Max.
yeah, I'm the one who always does it. So every other time it's gone perfectly fine.
Right.
You can thank me. But we sold like way more than we intended to.
Whoops.
Max caught it though. But anyway, so that just happened. That's why I was a little frazzled too. When I ran in, I was trying to do everything on my phone, which is not the ideal way to go into the back end of a website and try to fiddle with
Hack the Gibsons.
like the advanced rules and option sets and stuff like that. And I was like, why is this not working? But anyway, that's not why I didn't want to talk about that aspect of it. I want to talk about how I'm excited to try it and to see if people dig it. And I really want to try one next to a canned
Blend
just
of
ETH. Yeah, and see how
and
they
you'll
are.
have this on draft that day.
Yes, unfortunately, we'll have less on draft than we planned to because we sold way more than we expected.
Oh no, people wanted the thing we have. What
Yeah.
a terrible situation I'm in.
Well, you don't want to, whatever. I mean, come on. If all the people who know how that can be a problem, I'm sure you can relate to that. But yeah, so I'm excited about that. That'll be in 2 weeks. And if you're hearing it, too late. It's already gone. Wait till we have, wait for our 10th anniversay. We'll probably have a keg of it then. So.
When's that? I want to buy tickets.
Yeah, too late. It's already sold out. I messed up. No, that's in over a year. But I think I'll probably need to, since I've messed up on my anniversaries probably for the past 5 or 6 years and just have forgotten to do them. I think the 10th should probably be legit.
One
and I
will
should
do on
not
the 13th
forget.
anniversary.
I should exactly. It'll be on the.
It's the third
11th.
anniversary. Our 10th anniversary is the beer.
One year we did have a party, and I think halfway or 3/4 of the way through, someone did the calculation and informed me that we had been promoting it as the wrong year, and it was actually 1 year more than we were saying
Carry
it
the
was.
one and
Yes.
I think I remember that one.
Yeah,
I made a beer called Chris Quince.
that's right.
Yeah,
I remember
gin
that beer.
saison with quince.
It was good.
The Pipeworks version got like a very good score, and then the side project version, which didn't exist, got about half a bottle cap more on Untapped, which was very fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's
That's
cool.
great.
Yeah.
We love it.
Yeah, it was the unknown
We love
blind
it, folks,
experiment
don't we?
I ran where people thought it was a side project beer and liked it way more. Even
That's
though
cool.
it wasn't sour or anything. I don't know. One of my favorite moments.
Yeah. Should we get right into why don't we do the letter?
Let's do the letter.
And then we'll take a break and then reset and come back and get to the meat, the
meat
entree,
stories.
the entree. But this is a pretty good appetizer, and it plays very well into what we were talking about. I want to say what we were talking about this episode, but it's probably what we talk about every episode, which is why this letter might have been written. But anyway, this letter comes from Wisconsin, and it's from Jeremy, and he writes, "Hi, Chris and Mike. I wanted to pose, but also everyone, not just you and me, anyone here. Hi, Chris and Mike. I wanted to pose a question that I've spent a lot of time thinking about. Has craft beer's success destroyed its culture?" You're going to love this one. You're going to love this letter so much, Mike. "It seems that the sharp increase in the availability of good beer has had a significant degrading effect on beer culture. Not that long ago, I'd see the same people at a few craft beer bars, brewery tap rooms, and beer release lines because there were a number of opportunities to try special beers. Everyone pretty much knew one another. And today, the increase in both producers and retailers seems to have diluted this dramatically. Gone are the days where you get excited for a brewery's annual barrel-aged stout release. Now you just have to wait and see what adjuncts they're using this month before you place your online order and contact your proxy, or wait for it to sit next to the past 4 releases on some store shelf. It's hard for me to say if we're in a worse overall position today than we were in the past. Maybe they're really hold on, let me start over. Maybe they really were the good old days. Maybe these communities still exist on an even more local level. Maybe these people got older, started families, and focused on higher priorities than beer. Or maybe I'm just some hipster who's annoyed that his hobby has gone mainstream. Curious to hear your thoughts. Thanks, Jeremy." Thank you, Jeremy, for the letter.
Yeah, thank you,
Much
Jeremy.
appreciated. It'll go in my letter vault. I keep all the written
Well,
letters.
we do have to send them merch at some point.
Oh, yeah, you have to email me what size shirt you wear, and if you have a preferred color, and then we'll get you something.
Right.
And if you pick mustard or tan, it'll be from one set. And if you pick a color, it'll come from someone else.
Well, I think my prevailing thesis overall of my time on this show is that culture still exists. It's just that beer culture overall has grown so much more rapidly than that culture, which was predominant, 6, 8, 10 years ago. But there's probably more people that want the same things that Jeremy wants. But the way they're presented is definitely different. And that probably has a big amount to do with his perception of the culture, or like people like us being like, where is this part of it? I don't know if it's good or bad. I don't know how long it will last that beer is what it is now. I don't know if it will revert back to what it was, but yeah. I still do believe that because beer culture in general has grown so much larger, there is at least as many, if not more, people that want the same beers that we liked or wanted, or the things out of beer we liked or wanted from 10 years ago.
Feel free to hop in with any hot takes or remote takes that you guys feel. I don't know, what do you guys feel? Has beer culture, has it changed for the better? Just changed for the worse?
Kay, I'd be interested to hear your perspective as someone who's not on the supplier side.
Yeah, I think anytime, whether it's with beer or any other cultural touch point, music, art, whatever, anytime you think something is eluding you or doesn't exist anymore, someone else is having your very come to Jesus moment, that you had 8 years ago or whatever. Like someone else is experiencing the joy that you once had with whatever that cultural category is. So, I don't know, you got to rekindle the love, man. You got to find whatever that special thing was that made you feel that way about beer 6 or 8 years ago. If it's the people, maybe you're just you need to find a new little crowd to hang out with. Or if it's the joy of discovery, maybe you need to do some traveling. I don't know. Like,
Do
I
some
think
role play, spice things up.
spice it up. Like, have you gone on a date night lately?
Exactly.
When did you buy her flowers last? Yeah,
That's what it's funny. It's what reminded me. I think you're right though to some degree. I mean, I think, finding the love. Although if it's a hobby, I mean, and you're working towards having to do it, that's not really doesn't sound like fun. But I think you're right. It does seem to kind of ebb and flow. And I think you're also right, Mike, that there's probably some of each. I mean, I think there's probably a lot more just in quantity. But what do you call it? Your signal noise thing that you say?
I don't know.
Okay.
The signal to the noise ratio.
Yes. Signal to. I don't know. You mean the signal noise ratio? Yeah. Yes.
Makes it sound like something I talk about a lot. But it's, yeah.
Yeah. So I think So there's probably a lot more noise as well, or there might even be perhaps. Like maybe the beer culture was more of like a monoculture before, where it's much more stratified now, and there's people who are different in a different kind of segment of it than maybe you were, or that there was. Maybe everyone was just kind of us one kind of.
Well,
I don't know.
There weren't as many suppliers of the physical product that culture was built around, right? So they were tightly grouped, and as there goes from 1,700 to 9,000 suppliers of those things, they slice up niches within an already niche thing. So you end up, and then culture shifts as well, right? Like the agronomy shifts, right? The only reason there's hazy IPAs is because we are growing things that didn't exist before. You couldn't make hazy IPAs with Columbus alone, or Centennial alone. Right. So
prove them wrong, people out there. Prove them wrong.
Don't prove me wrong.
Don't.
Yeah.
But there were legitimate advances and changes in the ways you could even make beer in the last 15 years.
And it also
Go ahead.
It also sounds like Jeremy was enjoying the thrill of pursuit of these things, right? With like these releases and things like that. And he mentions now it's just easier than ever to get extremely good beer, which seems to me like maybe that was the point we had hoped for all along. Right. But if you enjoy the hunt and you don't have to hunt anymore, and it's just at your Safeway or what have you, then, maybe that feels less special, and you've got to, I don't know, start collecting records or something.
Right. And then if you don't enjoy the beers that are now the focal point of that hunt culture, right? Like that, because there's that hunt culture certainly still exists.
Yeah, the hunt culture is definitely there. I just went back and reread it, and I don't think he doesn't specifically talk about like waiting in lines or anything like that.
Okay.
But just being excited for a seasonal or an annual kind of release, and that's still around. I mean, we were just talking about how we were excited, or I was talking how I was excited about Celebration coming back out. I will also say that, how things kind of segmenting. I'm sure there's another podcast with vastly more listeners that is talking about, we're talking about cask beer and stuff like that, and they're talking about, a new stout release or a new pastry stout or something like that. And there's people who are really excited and then maybe they get that same kick out of wanting to try that new, candy corn marshmallow stout, which is so delicious and good. And
you're not helping the stereotype that people build of you.
Yeah, it's okay.
Well, I mean, there definitely has been a shift in the focal point of like craft beer 10 years ago, 15 years ago was grew out of home brewing, and that the process and that the creation from these traditional styles into this evolution of like Sierra Nevada Pale Ale being so bitter and blah, blah, all that stuff, that it was process driven and brewing driven and knowledge driven like that. And now it's more flavor driven than it ever has been, to be perfectly honest with you, but different flavors.
I will say to Jeremy's point though is I think all of us, I would guess all of us would agree that there was a time where craft beer events were special enough that they were genuinely exciting, that when a certain beer event came around, you wanted to go because you wanted to try the beers, you wanted to see the people, you wanted to be part of that. And there's so many of them now that it just doesn't have it. It's the same thing as the beers lined up on the shelf now. That's the same thing with events themselves. I mean, I used to go to tappings of when a beer was. I mean, I think I went to like a hop slam.
Right.
Tapping,
Sure.
And just stuff like that, and when there was some sour beers coming into the market, and it would be kind of cool, and you would go and you'd see the same people, and there was this kind of instant connection point because they were also excited about that. So I do think. I don't know. Are those still around too? It's just maybe. I mean, like maybe Hunapoo Day and other like these big events. Beer celebration. Maybe we'll talk about that later. But that one of these big events that people do get excited for. I mean, there's always those videos that you see online of like the gates opening and the herds like literally running to get to these beers. They seem pretty excited to me.
Well, yeah. I feel like when you optimize those things, you observe something be successful and you figure out why it was successful, and then you kind of reverse engineer it because that's what you do when you create something, right? If you're operating capitalism, you're like, oh, that thing worked. I should probably do something in that model. You squeeze some of the, feral nature of people just actually deciding for themselves what they liked about it. And so some of this might be a response to that, right? Of a like kind of smarter understanding of why people were engaged with this thing that misses some more of the nuance and some of the discovery or some of the ownership, to be honest, that the consumer had with it. If you give the consumer exactly what you think they want, they're just like, yeah, but I had nothing to do with that. So that was just a little thought.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it, for me, I can only speak within my perspective and the context of when I came up in craft beer, started drinking craft beer. That was 15 years ago at this point, and this was in Missouri. So, different kind of landscape at the time. We had some local breweries, but, for the first 5 years, it was discovery mode and like figuring out my palate, figuring out what was about beer. And then, hearing about these styles, or hearing about these breweries and chasing them down and getting that flavor moment, and then just further developing my palate personally. And then I got to a point where I started to be able to think for myself, and I could start to say, okay, not necessarily think for myself, but really identify what it is I liked about beer. And so I got to a point where the stuff that people were chasing, some of that stuff I really liked, some of it I didn't. So I stopped to care about it. And so maybe less of that discovery started happening for me. But I think you just find other ways to discover cool things about beer. I mean, you talk about what you're doing, Mike, with Saison, like that's interesting. That's a way to have discovery. So I would say to this person, it doesn't have to be an overall cultural thing. It can just be a personal thing, and just find things that excite you about beer and seek that out. I mean, that's what I try to do. I find bars that have certain beers that are maybe into the market. I get wind of like, hey, this couple kegs at the market, I'm going to go check it out. That's not something that a ton of people are going to go trade for, but that still excites me. So I find ways to stay excited about beer. I mean, obviously there's a lot more saturation right now. There's a lot more noise to wade through, but if, it's with any hobby, the more you get into it, the more you have to really dig to kind of be, impressed by it or energized by it. That's just kind of any hobby, I think.
I have a little experiment that I'm interested to try now. So everyone, the four people on you can do it too, Serge, if you like. If we were all in discovery mode, I don't know when we all got into, quote unquote, craft beer, but don't say it out loud, but think of what year it was roughly, because I can't exactly remember, when you think you got out of discovery mode. So come up with a year, and then we'll all say what year we were out of discovery mode where, define discovery mode for you, where you were just like,
hearing about certain breweries and certain styles and really trying, like for me, it would probably be like 2017.
Wait, you're not supposed to say it. Okay,
sorry, I'm already saying it.
Okay,
I'll say
all right.
2017 because that's like when, and that's like when hazy like started to be a big thing. It wasn't really in Chicago yet.
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to get a little bit of that to see what it was all about because that was kind of what people were talking about. But ever since then, maybe that's because there's not a lot.
I was going to say 2016.
I was going to say 2016.
Yeah.
And how about you, Kate? Did you have a year where you got out
I was
of
thinking
discovery?
2017, 18. That was also around the time that I moved to Montana, which seems to have this way less like insular beer culture. Like everyone here kind of likes beer a little bit in like a completely normal and healthy way. I mean,
But you miss Chicago.
like there
right?
are nerds, but there's like a lot of just people who are like, oh yeah, like these are my favorite 3 breweries, whatever. Like I'm not gonna, like pay $500 to join their bottle club, but like I go every week, on a weekend, like after skiing to have a couple beers. So I don't know. I just feel like it shifted my mindset a little bit into like a more probably normal level of enjoyment and like where it wasn't a primary, like the primary social activity.
Caricature.
Like we can meet at a bar and do other stuff, but it's not like, and let's just go to this bar.
Right. Like the reason you're going is because the beer at that bar. Right.
Right.
You're going to you're going to a bar to do other things, and you want to go to a bar that has cool beer,
Right. Yeah.
That's interesting that we all kind of landed around the same
I
year.
thought we were going
Yeah.
to. That's what I was curious.
Because we all came presumably at different points into craft beer, but to all kind of pick us around the same time, that might speak to
I think
Jeremy's point
it
about
kinda
where
does.
yeah. So I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. It's hard to kind of it's hard to be binary about it and say yes or no or this was better than before, because I think right now there is more good beer than ever. I think there's breweries doing some really cool stuff and really honing in their craft.
I'm going to ask some old timers. I'm going to get some old timers and ask them when they
Randy
kind of
Mosher's
got
like,
out
oh,
of discovery mode.
1982, I think I stopped.
Well, what if they say
Once it got
2016,
saturated.
2015?
This is a good question.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a good question to gather from people that are on the show.
Start getting those data points.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for generating some discussion, Jeremy. Very much appreciated. For those of you guys who are interested in sending letters, you folks out there, you can send a letter to us. It's in the show notes, but I'll read it out just for old time's sake, because I'm a traditionalist. I still like to read it out.
Got to.
I've recently realized I could have been putting for the past 4 years the address in the show notes, and I just discovered that a couple weeks ago.
And the letters
what do you
started
know? The
flooding
letters
in.
started coming in.
Not everyone's
more.
listening to this with a pen and paper waiting for the.
I know.
the
But
address.
it's 3173 North Elston Avenue in Chicago, 60618. You can send it to me, to Mike, to Serge, to just the Beer Temple. Serge, you know what? Serge has not gotten a letter addressed to him yet.
pretty rude.
I think Serge needs to get
The guy
a letter.
just got married, and no
It's
one
true.
wrote to congratulate him.
I know. I mean, think of all the fades that you've gotten to here because at the fingertips of Serge.
He's kind of like an umpire. When he's doing his job the best, we barely even know he's there.
Exactly. You must be doing a really good job then. You can also email us, send an e-letter
Yeah,
via
e-letter.
email
Right.
to insiders@craftbeertemple.com. Why don't we take just a very quick break? I'm going to reload on my beer. Delicious Algamator from Beechwood, by the way. Tasting very good. And then we'll come back and talk some more beer on the Beer Temple podcast.
Some top-notch salad content you just missed.
Oh,
Should have been recording.
We are now.
we are now.
Riveting,
So
riveting stuff.
we're back with the Beer Temple podcast. I am Chris Quinn. I'm joined by my co-host Mike Shalau and by Hot Take Jake, who's frustratingly trying to take a cork out of a bottle
It's a
of
5-year-old
Jester
beer,
King
so-
Spawn, coming up with excuses why
It's
he
from the
botched
year
it.
we all stopped loving craft beer.
And also Kate Bernot. And I was just not that I had to think of who it was. I was thinking in my mind how during the break there were two people at the bar. I asked both of them what year they got out of the
it was
discovery
me and Jake.
phase.
No, I'm just
Yeah. So I've decided
what'd they
I'm
say?
going to ask that question. One guy said just fairly recently, and someone else said, I don't know. I said, I don't know about Discovery, but I definitely got more jaded around, 2017. So I was like, yeah, okay, all right. So maybe there's something there to it. And because he's like, I still like to try new stuff. When I see exciting things, I still want to try them. So I think that's a fair delineate or,
Yeah, it's not as
demarcation.
it does just didn't when it stops feeling like alive to you. Like I like new things too, right? But I'm not like I want to go get a growler of that. Like that's got to be some cultural like progress for I don't know flavors and liquids.
Well, some people still want to go get crowlers of single barrel.
Yeah, but they can't
DSOD.
because you sold out and then you
true.
teased it on a podcast that will come out after the event.
Probably. Knowing how long it takes me to do it, yes. A year later. It'll be in time for the the release of it.
It's always a topical podcast.
But, yeah, speaking of that, I wanted to talk about some topical things. Kate has written extensively on this subject of Mikkeller and the allegations of, I just said impropriety, just to kind of as like a blanket statement. And I was, Mike, you sent 3.
I sent 3. There were more. You've been
I
writing
started going down
articles
a little bit of a
pretty regularly since June. Is that what the first one I think I found?
Yeah, in June there was a public art protest held outside their Copenhagen headquarters, and then I published my piece about actually talking to former employees of the company and about kind of like their specific allegations in July.
Yeah,
could you kind of a lull? Yeah.
Could you just give like a quick introduction to this topic for people who may not be as in tuned and haven't been reading your stuff since whenever?
Sure. So you could catch up with this in depth at goodbeerhunting.com, where I was reporting these pieces for. So Mikkeller is an international company at this point. They're based in Copenhagen, but they have operations in something like 23 countries, bars and breweries. They have a U.S. brewery in San Diego. And around the time this spring began in May, that Brienne Allen of Notch Brewing at Rat Magnet on Instagram started sharing anonymous, mostly, accounts of sexual harassment and discrimination and even assault within the beer world over this spring and summer. Mikkeller came up a bunch as a company. And it took me months of gaining the trust, really, of former employees, especially at the San Diego brewery, to get them to feel comfortable going public with some of these. And I published that in early July. And essentially what they're alleging, I called it a pattern of harassment, discrimination, and bullying. They're alleging everything from a lot of like just gender-based harassment, sexual harassment, as well as just general workplace safety issues and a lack of accountability on those issues. They're saying at the time we brought this to management, we tried to escalate these concerns. We tried to express how truly miserable we are and how unsafe we feel here. And they say, these things went nowhere. And all 4 of the women that I spoke to ended up leaving the company without really any resolution to that. So that's the baseline of really sort of quote unquote what happened. And then there have been varying responses to these things coming to light since then. As I was saying, there was kind of a lull, I felt like, after the story was published. I mean, people read it and there was response, but then things were kind of quiet over the summer, I felt like. And then they really came to a head again when Mikkeller hosts their annual beer celebration in Copenhagen every year. And, nearly like 100 breweries were scheduled to go. This took place October 22nd and 23rd of this year. And a few weeks before breweries started pulling out of the festival and saying they would not attend, sort of in response to the idea that the company had not fully addressed these allegations and had not, sufficiently proven that they were making changes or making amends with former employees. And so that kind of really like touched everything off again. I think that kind of catches us up. I feel like I've been living this for like 10 years.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. So
it just feels it feels like I've been reporting this story for so long. But I think those are the basics.
No, I think certainly I feel more caught up on it now, and I've even learned some things from just that overview. So thank you. Okay, the lull and everything. It's interesting. It's almost as if I guess I don't know. It's hard to say, but maybe if you don't address things, they may just die down. But then they don't go away. And if you have something that's high profile, it will rear, back up.
Right.
Which I'm guessing, who knows who wants to get into the minds of the decision makers over there, but probably just we're thinking like, all right, let's just not say anything and hope it all just dies down and people move on and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, there was also like when breweries started pulling out, Mikkel went on like Danish radio and started talking about people trying to sabotage his business with false allegations. And then during the festival or around the festival, they were supposed to have dialogues about it. And from the reporting of it, it didn't seem like those were really dialogues at all. They were just kind of dog and pony shows of like, we're doing something about it so that they could have the festival. And so I think they're kind of shooting themselves in the foot by not actually engaging with what people are talking about. And this is like the tone I feel like Mikkeller has had for a very long time, that there are now just specific allegations about it, right? This like kind of F you, we do what we want tone.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. A
like
tone of just being kind of
aloof and
dickish.
And yeah.
And I don't mean that like necessarily Three Floyds has kind of a tone of not aloof, but like dickish.
Right.
And I know people and like people who work at that place, and they would probably agree. People, they take on almost like personas, some of these brands and stuff like that.
That's what a brand is, right? It's like a entity personified.
And dickishness is definitely one that I think Mikkeller had always embodied, even overseas and thousands of miles away. This kind of like looking down a little bit.
Keeping people at arm's length of like you can never be in the inner circle. I'm very cool, and like this is kind of like the worst manifestation of that, right? That the employees there felt that way about legitimate concerns they had about harassment or physical working conditions. And it's a good example of the reality of when people talk about culture in a business, right? Mm-hmm. Where people are always, it's a buzzword, like, how's your culture, like this and that. It's like, and it stems from the top down, I believe. I don't personally know Mikkeller, I only met him once, but like,
I don't know.
To present that persona and then to have these allegations come through, it's like it is the manifestation of the culture in your business, it feels like to me.
Kate, correct me if I'm wrong, was it something where he wasn't really addressing too much until breweries started pulling out of the festival?
Exactly. Yeah. And up until that point, from July onwards, Mikkeller's public communication statements to media, statements to me, had been, essentially denial. Like, maybe a couple bad apples kind of here and there, which we're not going to name, but there's not like a pervasive problem here. And then it wasn't until breweries began pulling out, Mikkeller does his extremely, I would say, like off base interviews with Danish radio and newspapers, which then the company had to walk back in public statements and say, oh, those actually don't reflect the way we feel about this. But then that was the first point at which I got an email from the company saying, we admit that severe harassment and misogyny took place at the brewery. So it took months. I mean, it took months. It took dozens of breweries pulling out and forcing the company to address this for there to be what former employees wanted all along, was just to admit that wrongdoing had happened. I don't think these employees want to see the company, like from my conversations with them, they do not want to see the company like burned to the ground or like, they just want someone to say they're really sorry and to indicate ways that this won't happen anymore. But as far as a manifestation of like the founder's personality, I find that aspect of this really interesting, because at this point, the company has something like 700 global employees, and yet it's still like the Mikkeller show, right? Like so much of him.
I actually
in this.
Googled. So while I was reading, I Googled their CEO, right, and I clicked on a link to an article about how they had hired a CEO. I like to look at the face of people that, like, when it's like Kenneth Madsen or whatever it is. I clicked on this link to an article about it, and the first 4 pictures were Mikkeller. And then at the bottom there was, I don't even know if in that article, the only one that was actually about the hiring of the CEO, I think from their website, had even a picture of the guy they had hired, which typically would be the first thing you put in the article. So this is also an interesting dissolving of the idea that any brand is any one person, right? So while they can be very influential in the culture, it's also clear that he's not calling the shots anymore. And that there are other articles about like their whole Shea Stadium thing, and like that were like about how disattached from the actual operations the individual was. But it is interesting that someone can create this culture and then now also have very little.
Well, he created a brand, and he has there's 700 people.
Well, there's so much,
enacting that brand, but it's been so much more brand first than anything in the whole time.
The other thing is the brand is literally named after him. If it was named,
it was him and another guy who's
Copenhagen Beer Snobbery or whatever, if it, Copenhagen Beer Lovers, he probably wouldn't be, and he cultivated, I think, this celebrity. He is, without a doubt, one of the most famous people most recognizable people
worldwide,
in beer.
guaranteed. No one else has like a tap room in Malaysia or wherever.
Right.
Like there's like Thai tap rooms for Mikkeller.
And I do think that his personality has a lot to do, and his eye for aesthetic has a lot to do with the success of the company. But it is interesting when, as like the old Chappelle show said, like when keeping it real goes wrong, it's like, when your internal workings are the same as your external like marketing affect, that's, that's problematic, and it's kind of like the flip side of the coin that should be addressed. But maybe someone who's like that isn't I don't know.
I mean, it's a similar. Go ahead, Kate.
A former manager who was a manager at the San Diego brewery told me that, and I thought this. God, after months of reporting on the story, I was like, this is the nugget. This explains everything. He told me everything about that company and brewery is about doing things against like anti-corporate, right? Like Mikkeller doesn't believe in like slick, the way things have always been done, and he's countercultural and whatever.
Like punk and rebel a little bit.
Brewdog.
And in the way that he said internally they would make fun of breweries that like advertised and had these slick, kind of billboards and stuff. They'd be like, haha, that's so dumb and embarrassing. They saw HR the same way. They said, that's corporate. That's too slick. That's like what the big guys do. We're not about that. So we are deliberately sort of anti-process and systems, which in a company of 600 people just isn't possible anymore. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you want to do right by people, like you need process. You can't have 600 employees and expect them all to perform perfectly all the time. So that to me, when I realized, they saw HR as the same thing as a billboard, I was like, this helps me understand the mindset at work here.
Right. It did not fit into the culture or the vibe.
No, it fit into the culture perfectly to be anti or flippant about anything that would be
formalized,
quote unquote, culture or structured, which is absurd because you have 700 employees, 600 employees worldwide, and 19 different like ownership structures. Like you're all about those types of things.
Well, I mean, here's the thing.
You are what you actually do, not what you espouse. You are what you do.
Yes, I would agree, but I mean, I do think that having this insane hodgepodge without any HR is, that is anti a lot of those things, and what happens as a result, maybe you're learning why those things happen, and you have to give up some things as you become 600, 700 people big, because not doing that has risks, just like not having, I'm sure he had an accountant. I'm sure.
Right. No accountants aren't punk rock enough, so he was just.
We just put the money under the mattress.
Right. He has an attorney.
Denmark tells you exactly how much tax to pay, and you just pay it.
Well, yeah, I mean, you pretty much nailed it there, Chris. He has an attorney, so to me, it's all kind of BS. It's always been a brand, and real talk, the beer was never that great. So I never understood how they got so big. It was all brand and
aesthetic.
Aesthetic, yeah, 100%.
Aesthetic's awesome.
Yeah,
aesthetic is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, but plenty of other breweries doing that and doing good beer and doing right by their employees.
No, I mean, he never really cared, especially about quality. That was obvious. I'm not here to sit and like bash the brand or anything, but like I think that it was definitely form over function isn't quite the right term, but it was definitely how stuff looked and how it was perceived was
right. My point, I'm not meaning to bash either. I'm just saying when you can look at a brewery or a company and like you see all these other things kind of not being good, like the intention isn't there, then it's not surprising that stuff like this happens at Mikkeller, when to me the red flags were there kind of forever. Not to say that I knew that was happening, but that's just kind of my perspective on that brand. But it's also like the largest example of probably what's happening in a lot of breweries across the country that do the same thing, but they're very small and they don't have enough people that are willing to come out and speak about it. When you have 700 employees, chances are you're going to have more people that can speak out versus a brewery of 8-9 people. One person hasn't experienced, they're going to feel they have no one else to talk to. And HR, that's a good thing to have at companies to like mitigate risk for the employer, but we know that that's what they're there for. They're there on behalf of the employer. So what's the power of the employees in these situations? That's really just to mitigate the risk from like lawsuits for these employers. So Mikkeller, in their perspective, they should have had an HR department, but it would have it prevented these instances from happening in the first place. We don't know.
Well, I mean, in a 700-person company, effective HR, while it is meant to protect the company, should provide material changes to the workers because of that, right?
I don't think they're designed to do that.
They're not designed to do that, but it is like a byproduct of having effective HR, right?
Yeah.
So by the combination of having such a large company and not having an engaged, an effective HR, it makes it worse. Well, I agree with you about what HR's explicit intention is.
It'll give the avenues for the employees to report things. But how they get addressed and how it could impact the culture, I think, remains to be. I mean, we've seen that across all corporate.
Agreed, but couldn't we also agree that if HR had been doing its job, they would have protected Mikkeller better than to allow
that's
the
what I'm
working
saying.
situations that these
But then
would have existed in?
not necessarily the employees.
While the intentions aren't pure to protect the employees, it would have provided better working conditions because it would have been heard and mitigate
from a strictly
attempt to
legal,
mitigate the possibility of this type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, Kate, are you comfortable like giving your take on this, or do you want to kind of keep it as, since this is an ongoing thing? I don't want to. Well, I mean, you're not going to be pushed into doing something you don't want, but I mean, what's your feeling on where stuff stands now, and where do you think this is like going to lead? And if you could crawl into the minds of some of those people, the CEO, I don't even remember his name, but
Johnson,
and Mikkeller.
So truthfully, I did not see this becoming such a protracted story when I reported it. I mean, I think there are still so many unresolved questions about this. It's like, when did leadership in the company know about the scale of the problem that they had? How sincere are these efforts? I think that gets to a lot of the heart of this, is like, there's been a lot of, like, to the company's credit, they have brought in external help and they have put much more robust systems in place for their employees. But I think what a lot of the public wants to know is how sincere those efforts are. And it's hard to know that, especially for me, even as someone who is like quite involved in this story journalistically. I have never been able to talk to any of the leadership on the phone or by Zoom. It has been months. Like, every single time I send them an email, I invite a phone call or a Zoom or something, because I feel like just getting these emailed statements is not helping me to understand some of these deeper questions. And it doesn't happen. So,
Well, it's a risk. They're taking a risk by doing that, for sure.
Well, they've certainly given a lot of other interviews.
Oh, of course. Well, but I think that's a credit to you. Is in a way is why they haven't for you, is because they know that it wouldn't be just a cookie cutter interview where they can say what they want and get away with it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know that I really have like a take, because I don't feel like this is resolved yet. But I think one extremely productive development is that as a result of these women coming forward publicly and, like, in many cases using their names and attaching their names to this, which is so brave and like impressive that they were willing to kind of withstand public scrutiny on a lot of this. There is a small dialogue now happening between them and the brewery, and they're beginning to get some answers to their questions. Whether or not they find those answers satisfactory, I don't quite know yet, but there's at least some interaction happening there. So I think that's one productive part of this. But yeah, I don't know. It doesn't feel done yet to me.
Sure. No, I mean, it seems like this was just a big spotlight that was shined on an ongoing thing, and that a big spotlight because of this Copenhagen beer celebration.
Yeah.
And we didn't really get into that. We glossed over it, but it a lot of, so what happened was, and you know this so much better, so I'd like you to tell me, how did the CBC and people, breweries, it's an invitational, and some pulled out, and there was certain times that people pulled out. How did that whole thing go down?
Yeah, so I think, like I said, there seemed from my end to be this kind of lull over the summer and into the early fall in attention to the story. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, there's this big festival coming up. Are people still going to this? I think is what like some people in the public asked. And truthfully, I think it was public inquiry. Some people would say public pressure. People, fans, I don't know, asking these breweries like, oh, are you still going to this? Like, why? And Mikkel, in his appearance on Danish radio and with the newspaper, kind of called this like a woke mob, basically like pressuring breweries to not go. And then it was like, sorry, we didn't mean that. But I think, people in the public did want to know, which, kind of forced, I think, some breweries' hands. And of course, once the initial, I think it was 3 when I initially reported this story, we were a few weeks out from the festival still, 3 had pulled out. And then I think once, the initial batch kind of pulled out, like it was easier for others to snowball and kind of jump on that. But yeah, I think it was public, pressure, inquiry, curiosity, whatever you want to call that. But, beer drinkers seem to care and ask those questions.
It's interesting. And there was also a concerted effort to reach out to, and I learned this from let me say, I learned everything I said from your writing. So if I get something wrong,
no, you're doing
please,
great.
Correct me. Okay.
Yeah, you're doing great.
But there was a concerted effort, an organized effort to reach out to the breweries that were in attendance or were listed as being in attendance, and confronting is not the right word, but informing them of these allegations. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because that's pretty. I don't know if I've ever heard of that happening before. That seems like a level of organization beyond just the comment section, so to speak.
Sure. So this has been a point of contention, just like how organized this effort is, because Mikkel characterized this as like a very concerted effort by just a few critics to kind of, force these breweries to withdraw.
And do you think that's true, or?
I spoke to a couple women who are mostly based abroad in Europe who are sort of the Brienne Allen rat magnets of Europe, who were involved in this effort. And they say, all we did was shine attention on this. We did not contact breweries directly. We merely raised the question on our social media, and other people also became interested and took up this sort of cause. So there's kind of a question of how directly they were forcing breweries' hands. But regardless, they brought the issue to very public attention, right? Mm-hmm. So which I think shows it's an interesting moment for like the power of the consumer, right? Because regardless of how organized these women were, they're not brewery owners. They're not they're not within the organization. They're enthusiasts. They're part of the industry as media maybe, or, other organizations. But really it was kind of like consumer public general criticism, which I think is an interesting and like kind of powerful moment.
So the people who were reaching out to these breweries were consumers. They were non-industry people saying like, are you aware that this is going on? Wow.
That's kind of my understanding. I mean, whether there were some
sure
room servers or something in there, like but it was not like
not going to hold you to the fact
of the BA.
Right, exactly. Wasn't a phone bank.
Kind of we'll say grassroots maybe is the word to use here. Just kind of like a grassroots effort.
This is a legitimate grassroots
research. Which feels like an interesting component of this as well, is like the power of just like kind of everyday people that exert a lot of pressure, make noise. Yeah.
Interesting.
I have a question actually, Kate. So you've talked with some employees. Are you getting the sense? I mean, I kind of view this as a part of a larger kind of labor issue in the industry. There's other kind of stuff that's been going on that's been reported about. Are you getting the sense from folks who work at these breweries that they're thinking about collectivizing, or just like that's something that's more prevalent? I know there's a story that Josh Noel just wrote about Goose Island trying to unionize, and
Right.
and so I think about
They're very happy with him.
yeah, I'm sure he's getting
I heard
invited.
he
I
got
saw that.
disinvited from the
Oh, I
tasting.
saw some firsthand tension.
But my
Anyway.
point being that
We'll
you
talk
know
about that after
I
the show.
think
No.
you mentioned like consumers having power, but I think what we're seeing right now is kind of this a little bit of a groundswell of like the workers at these breweries realizing they need to have some kind of power. It's not just about cultural change at these breweries. They need to have ways to push back on management when things are going wrong, because you could change a culture at a brewery. Culture could start great, but if that person leaves, someone new comes in that's terrible, that changes the whole thing. So are you getting a sense that that's changing at all, or is there
I think it's
desire for
telling that like labor in the US is so uncollectivized that I have not heard that necessarily as like a solution to these issues. It's telling that this whole rat magnet thing like happened through social media and traditional media, and not through any kind of like existing like internal structures, right? Like there was no within beer mechanism to deal with this. It all had to happen externally, and that's even what these former Mikkeller employees are saying to me is like, nothing, they forced our hand, they forced us to go public because nothing we were doing internally mattered one bit. So like at some point it's your only resort is to like go to the court of public opinion. So I think that's a
like
a
not
real
even go to the court of
condemnation
public. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's not. It's pulling back the curtain more than going to the court of public opinion. It's like, okay, if it doesn't work, then. Well, I'm sorry, I don't want to contradict what you said, but it is like
No.
this is like, hey, look what's going on, and perhaps it is the same thing that offers up public opinion, but it is exposing, going to the public with what you were trying to, don't air, what do they say? Don't air dirty laundry. It's like
I'm not sure.
the saying.
Don't clean your dirty laundry in public.
Is that
I just heard that on Succession.
Yeah. But that's basically what it is, like airing dirty laundry in public when you were trying to do it privately, and if it's just ignored, I mean,
at some point you kind of just have to like shine the big spotlight on it. Yeah. But I think, it's just regardless, it's like a condemnation of any kind of collectivist labor action that there was no
Totally
mechanism to deal with this.
You were talking, that's a big,
it's
step.
It's a very sad state that the only collectivist labor action you have is like, let's like get an Instagram following about this. Like, it's or get some really well written articles. Not to say it's only Instagram
please.
or anything, but
no, I mean all credit to like the women. I mean, and again, sometimes I just think about like the year that Brienne and others have had of like, again, this is all just like on their backs to do this work, right? Like no one is paying them to do it. No one's like, I mean, they're getting like some institutional support now, but really it's just like up to individual people to like take this on.
100%.
And that's really hard to ask of people.
Yeah, it's very intense.
To like watchdog your industry.
And it just makes it
not your industry, like you three assembled here, but like watchdog an industry. That's hard.
Totally, and I think that's kind of goes back to just asking that question of I'm in the industry. I just having these conversations with other people. I think we've been talking a lot about gender-based violence in the industry, sexual harassment, or just like people not getting certain positions because of it's being a boys' club or whatever. And I just think of so much of it right now is focused on cultural changes. And while that's all great, I'm just wondering if I'm hoping we can start seeing a more collectivized effort of like actually changing the systems and bringing some power back so that we can actually like address these in a much more swift manner versus like these long drawn out, like, these long campaigns that have to rely on one person speaking out and putting their career on the line and putting their, getting threats and all that stuff.
Well, to that, like that long drawn out idea, like, what do you think? How this is obviously speculative at this point, but Kate, do you think this would be different if it was an American brewery getting this same pushback versus this Danish brewery that's kind of removed from their main consumer bases all over the world? Would there, if it was like a brewery was like, I'm a local brewery and we do that, like, obviously this is you can't know for certain, but I feel like that has to have something to do with this, right? This decentralization of Mikkeller, and it's spread out all over the world. Would it be different if it was a brewery that has like one tap room and like distributes to a couple states? Like how?
Yeah, I mean, there certainly wouldn't have potentially like an international invitational beer festival for people to drop out of. So
excellent point. Terrible question. Excellent point.
But I mean, part of what made this story so notable to me is like just the scale of this company. Like, again, if this was a local one taproom brewery, not to say this wouldn't be an important story, but like it's an international business story at this point. Right. So yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say. Like, Mikkeller's just such a weird company.
Right.
It
well,
is. If you ever go to Copenhagen, so I will say it changed my understanding of Mikkeller if you go to Copenhagen, because he runs that town.
But it also
everything cool has his name on it.
It is very much like if we're going back to Jeremy's letter, this is like the good old days of craft beer. They just froze in 2013, where you make a bunch of different beers and you just kind of double middle finger the camera every time you give an interview to the New York Times. Like, maybe they weren't the good old days. Like, there was a bunch of stuff going on back then that was horrible. And like, I feel like Mikkeller is kind of just that ethos, like that Three Floyds, like that, like we make great beer and you can go like fuck off, like 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 that ethos just spread out over the world to a bunch of people who hadn't encountered it yet, and that allowed that kind of culture, that like
the counterculture. I mean, that's a counterculture, but that doesn't mean that you have to do wrong by your employees to be counterculture. I don't think.
I'm not trying to say that, but it does. But if you follow that ethos out to its logical extension and you truly are about that, I mean, maybe it does manifest in these ways, right? It manifests in that like you don't have protections for people because it's like,
yeah, I mean, there's
you
a
can
level
go both ways though, dude. You can be like the big breweries don't, you're just an ant to them, and we actually care about our employees. I mean, you can,
but you have to then care about your employees. You have to actually care about your employees.
But I'm not saying that. But I'm not saying that the other breweries mentioned alongside Mikkeller don't actually think that. I mean,
right, and I don't want to.
Three Floyds has
those names aside, that they're
women in very high positions at that brewery.
Absolutely, but the culture of beer at that time was you get paid peanuts, you don't have health insurance, you're lucky to be doing a cool thing. Like, those were like three parts of beer culture when you were working in it.
Wow, we're digressing, but I would say that
this is central to it.
That's like a third wave thing. I mean, I don't know if that's a Stone or a Three Floyds thing. That's more of like a Pipeworks thing. All right, I don't mean to.
This is not a names podcast.
No, it's more of like a third. That's like a third wave thing where people got their start as as free labor, and I don't know if that's how people got their start at Stone, Mikkeller, or Three Floyds. So I'm just putting it out there, like
just to cover yourself. Pipeworks had health insurance well before most breweries.
Sure.
Did. So like that is not an example.
I did not mean it.
Right. But that was the ethos, right? We're counterculture, and if you want those things, get out of here. And that is not a grown-up industry. It's a way to market your industry, and when those lines blur of like authentic. It's authentic to be punk rock, and but is it authentic to carry that ethos over to the entirety of running your business? It's probably not for the better if you do that.
Yes,
is the takeaway from Mikkeller.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, a lot of it is, And
or
and
a simplified take.
and the cynic in me, it comes naturally. I can't help it. Like the pullout, I was reading that and watching how it had been a little, and then all of a sudden it was a lot, and I'm always very curious as to why people chose to stick with or not stick with it. And the end result, was there any effect on the end result of the actual event? I know that there was, there seems to be an ongoing issue that's developing with the overall company. But for the event, do you know, Kate, if there were any effects on the CBC?
It still happened. Obviously, the event happened. 7,500 people attended.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jeez, that's a lot of people.
I did talk to an importer, who was mentioning, well, now I've kind of got like this beer from these breweries that pulled out, and like I have to sell it around Copenhagen. But he's like, nah, it should be fine. Like bars want cool American beer or whatever. It's fine.
I'm sure.
But I mean, I was not there. From what I saw, it looked festive. It looked like an event that happened and people had a good time at it. And they held, Mikkeller held these semi-public meetings kind of like adjacent to it to like, quote unquote, like address these issues. But at the festival itself, I mean, it seemed fine from what I could see.
Yeah. Yeah. Just an interesting.
No, that's a great point. Like this event happened. They sold tickets.
Right. I'm wondering how many people knew about the allegations that were there, or just all the stuff that came out. Because
my guess
I
is if you're geeky enough to go, you knew. But that's just me.
Right. 7,500 people.
I mean, but they come. It's like an international.
It's a lot of people.
It's an international event.
Well, then you also start getting to like how prevalent is the culture? Like this is an unacceptable culture of all over the world, right?
Well, let me put it this way. Everyone that I know who went, I would, if I had to bet, I would easily bet that they knew. I mean, probably knew before I did.
Sure.
I mean, these are,
and that's
the geek
13 of the 7,500 that went.
Yeah, but I mean, I only have to go by the people I know, and as a type of person who goes to this event, I don't think it's the 13 people I know, and then other than that, it's whoever goes to the the Soldier Field event. I don't think it's like all of them and then the 13 people I know. I mean, I think this is a beer geeks
well, no, it's
event.
also people that are like, take the train for 4 hours from Sweden or from Belgium or whatever.
Sure, but how much of it is local? Like, how many people are just like,
I mean, this was in the Danish, this was like making headlines on Danish NPR, essentially, and like in their newspapers. So
I think people know
it's not as though this isn't getting attention overseas. It's hard, of course, to like gauge what that culture is like. Also, oh my god, the time difference in report for me is 8 hours to Copenhagen. That has also been a huge challenge of this whole thing, and like language barriers. But like, yeah, and understanding the culture of like how is this event perceived over there, and like who are the attendees, like that still is somewhat elusive to me.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Thank you for all the time spent. I mean, just the number of words written about it is
well,
telling,
had I known that in July,
right?
No, but I do just appreciate that, and really not the only reason, but like a major reason I cover this is because like people do seem to care, and that is, I think, appreciated. Like that's the point for these former employees, right? Is like you hope people care. So
you're doing great work. I think it's been a long time where some of these issues have been talked about like amongst people within the industry or had experiences, but wasn't really given a ton of credence in journalism, and that was kind of one of the only outlets to kind of legitimize this stuff. Otherwise, people just kind of limit it to hearsay or that. So, and I think it's moving the needle. I mean, with what Brienne has done. I mean, this last year was pretty wild to see, and obviously we have a long way to go kind of building that up, but I think we're headed in the right direction. At least I hope so.
I hope so too.
Well, can we take another actual 5-minute break and then come back and close things out? Maybe do a quick little story and talk. I mean, we can. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Is that
That
okay
sounds
with
great.
everyone? Okay.
Yeah, sounds
cool.
great. Welcome back to the Beer Temple podcast. We're here with my co-host Chris Quinn of the Beer Temple, Hot Take Jake Guidry from Hopewell Brewing, and Kate Bernot, writer at large, and of all the articles we were talking about, good beer hunting. Welcome back, everyone. How you doing? How was the break?
It was good.
Yeah, you need a
Such a
break.
good break.
Loving it.
You gotta take a
Great
break.
5 minutes.
Hot break balance is what it's all
Hot break,
about.
Jake.
Yeah, hot break. Jake.
I love my breaks. This Alpha King's tasting great.
Yeah, exactly.
Taking a Pincus.
Great hot break, Jake. So I was just going through some of the topics that we had. One of them was a little stuffy, but what I realized, and a trick of mine, is to ask about it and see what gets conversation going.
What an
So
amazing trick
one of them gets that's going. That's
for a
fine. You can belittle it.
podcast.
You can belittle it all you want. It's a trick of the trade, I call it. I'm teaching you, young Padawan.
I'm glad to be under your wing.
Yeah. But anyway, so friend of the show, beer cruncher / beer aficionado / Douglas Valicki
/ Rev head of propaganda.
Yes. / Rev head of propaganda, put out an article on his blog, or a blog post, I guess you would call it.
E-letter
And
to his blog.
And so it was about how, I guess it was called Winter IPAs Are Coming, and we were talking about a little bit ahead of time. He was thinking that there's this, winter IPAs are going to be a thing. But to me, more what I thought was interesting was how he was talking about how seasonal beers are very popular. I also think this is always the time of seasonal beer, is the end of the year. The fall and winter are the time of seasonal beers.
The end of summer through the beginning of next year.
And I think people do generally drink very seasonally in the summer as well. They're just not maybe as blatantly called seasonals, but they very much are still seasonal beers. I mean, people brew certain beers for the summertime when people or certain styles are just drank way more in the summer. He was positing that maybe this late winter, early springtime is kind of like a lull, and that there might be an opportunity for, some seasonal beers or beverages to be created. He was saying it was this winter IPA thing. I'll just go out and say right now, I'm not so sure that the winter IPA is going to be a thing, but I do find it interesting and accurate that it's like the doldrums of beer seasonals this time of year.
Well,
and I do think that there is some opportunity there.
It's just the doldrums of beer sales too. Like, it's the slowest time. Like, December is all right, but January, February is brutal for beer sales. So I think he's just like, what's the most popular beer style? Let's slap the season on it and see if people buy it. Like, that's kind of where we're at in quote unquote innovation, to go back to our conversation with Doug. But like, what is wintry about these IPAs?
But that's not. I mean, we can go down that
just
path. That is, I think, the least interesting thing about the article was that winter IPAs are going to be the new style that we all have to talk about. I'm much more interested in, do you think there is the possibility of a late winter, early spring seasonal? And I'm crazy because I think about this stuff a lot because we drink so seasonally. And the transition seasons are also, we drink that way too. Like Oktoberfest and Pumpkin Ale are like stylistically very transitional. I mean, Oktoberfest is, it's still light-bodied, a little heavier. It's a little darker, a little heavier in alcohol than like a Pilsner would be. But it's not to the stout barley wine or whatever you would want to say level. On the spring side, I mean, looking traditionally from a German standpoint, it's still light. Like the Maibach is lighter than an Oktoberfest, but it's just higher in it's still high in alcohol. So it's got the alcohol of like these winter beers, but it's starting to brighten up as you come into spring. I could be crazy, but I do think it's an interesting kind of transition out of winter. And I think there is an opportunity there. And I'm just curious if you guys think that anyone could capitalize on a spring beer. I remember Aprahop from Dogfish Head being like, I would look forward to that as like a spring beer every year. I don't even know if they make it anymore, but it was like an Aprahop. It would come out in April. It had apricots, and it was cool.
Notorious April fruit.
Yeah, right.
It starts with
if we're gonna go there,
it's close enough.
Close enough.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, if you're making good apricot beer, it shouldn't come out until spring. But
True. Fair enough.
From a marketing standpoint, though, if we know that January and February are extremely slow beer sales months, do you want to create a seasonal that like says winter that is going to be out of code and like out of drinkers' minds by April when we start to get the spring and summer stuff? Or do you just need to like close that winter inventory?
No, but it's gonna come out in early November and be like seasonal creep before it even exists.
Guilty as charged.
Yeah.
No, I mean,
are you guys making a winter IPA?
No, we released a winter lager this week, which obviously has more precedent than not much. I mean, Sam Adams, but less of reinventing
Summer lager, winter lager.
less reinventing the wheel than winter IPA. I think the beer probably already exists. It's just recontextualizing it and pitching it back to the consumer as something that is better in the context of colder months, maybe. I don't know. I had Tend, which is Half Acre's winter IPA, and they clearly brewed that with intention for the season, I think, anyway. But it's not a new style of beer, right? It's just an IPA and reformulated for a new context, and I think that's great. It gives the more we can educate consumers of like, when is it you want to drink this? And most consumers are going to drink something, and they just kind of want to be told what to drink, I think. But for people like me, we kind of know, okay, I don't need to only drink this style for this time of year. But a lot of consumers just want to go to the store. Oh, winter IPA, they pick it up. And so I do think it's a lot of a marketing thing. I don't think it really changes.
How educational is this? Like, wouldn't education in this context be like, here's caramel malts and here's things
Sure. Educational is not the right word. I think just kind of positioning people, like directing people the best way you can without being able to hand sell your product to people. Stores can do that, but we know now that stores aren't, unless it's like the Beer Temple or smaller niche stores, your bigger stores aren't doing that work for you. There's so much out there. So how do you communicate to the consumer as effectively as possible? Maybe there's some cynicism in that. I totally see that. But if you're coming from a good perspective, I think you can position your beers to say, hey, drink this during this time of year. It's kind of when it's going to click the most. I don't know. For sure. That's how I see it.
Yeah. I'm not against that at all. I didn't want to present myself as being anti presenting beers that people will like at any given time, but it is not like an education of like, this is a winter IPA.
Education was the wrong,
and that was something you backed off.
Yeah, education's the wrong term. So, but yeah, I think.
But it's more just being like, here's a thing you like, plus the season we're in is what it's
occasions. Here is when you drink this.
What about Bell's Winter White? Like their winter seasonal is a wit beer. Mm-hmm. So I mean, you could say the same thing about that, like a winter wit.
Sure. I'm curious. So I haven't had that beer in a while. What?
It's a wit beer.
Just a straight, like there's
it's just a wit beer.
New ingredient.
I mean, there is a very robust winter tradition of orange peel and cloves being put into stockings, so that could be where that came from.
Well, what about hot mulled drinks for real? I mean, you do put that stuff
spiced, but that's not what we're talking about.
Yeah, well, I mean,
we're talking about
spiced
all
beer.
the hops you couldn't put in beers during the summer because they weren't juicy enough going into an IPA in November.
No, all right. I mean, it looks like no matter what I say, we're going to talk about winter IPA. So apparently that's
what the article was about.
Focus of. All All right. Is that what this show is about? This segment is about?
I mean, the article was about winter IPAs.
Sure.
This is a show about the articles, isn't it?
Okay.
Okay. Or I mean, it doesn't have to be.
Apparently, it does have to be because I said what I thought was interesting about it, and we went back to what the article's about. But we can we can do this. You're not. It's cool.
Okay.
Anyway, so we can talk about that too. We can hash that out. So winter IPAs are cool.
Chris. Let's talk cold IPAs.
Cold IPAs are another
you're
thing.
wrong. They're not going to happen. They're the new brewed IPA. You heard it here first, folks.
I think cold IPAs are. I mean, I don't know. I like the name more than winter IPA personally.
Yeah.
But
it's different. That's called. We don't have to get into this whole conversation about cold IPAs.
But we will, I'm sure.
But we will. Maybe off air. But
yes. No, I mean cold IPAs are just IPAs by another name, I would imagine.
IPAs fermented cold, so that could be with a lager yeast or it could be an ale
Kolsch yeast or something.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, that doesn't really. I mean, whatever. They're fine. I mean, they're not bad. I mean, I've all the cold IPAs I've had. We've talked about them before. I mean, it doesn't seem like it's enough of a style to me. But anywho, why don't we wrap it up? I think it's about time. The thing has become nice and icy here, like a cold IPA. That's fine. I'd like to give a shout out to winter IPAs. I think they're going to be the next big thing. And thank you to Doug for writing the article.
You also try 10 though. It's good.
Which one? Oh, from Half Acre. Yeah, I've had it.
It's good.
It is good. I think it's good. Jake, anything you would like to say before we get out of here?
No, just have a good rest of your year, everybody, and if you can, enjoy your time with your friends and family. Thanksgiving's coming up. I'm looking forward to seeing some friends and eating some good food, drinking some good beers and wine and all that.
Now I have a question for you. Pumpkin beer. I think Thanksgiving is the time for pumpkin beer.
I have not had a pumpkin beer in a minute, but maybe I'll bring a pumpkin beer.
If you can still find them. It isn't August anymore.
Do you have any in the store right now?
I don't know. I have some right there.
Okay, great.
It's my favorite.
Some. Okay. Is that the
Whole hog?
Whole
hog from Point.
Right.
You got to hold on to it a little bit because I think it's less of a Halloween beer and more of a Thanksgiving beer.
Yeah, totally. With your pumpkin pie.
Pumpkin pie, but it's all gone by then. So it's a pain in the
Better
ass.
get your cold IPAs.
Exactly, because that's what you're going to have. Mike, Kate, anything you guys would like to say? Kate, thank you for logging on, being our first tech guest.
This was great. This is just making me really miss drinking beer in Chicago. You guys are so spoiled. I think I knew that when I lived there, but I didn't maybe fully have the depth of gratitude that I should have. So just keep drinking all the tasty Half Acre winter IPAs for me. For those of us who can't,
Right. Will do. Well, thank you. Thanks again. And thanks for taking us through the whole saga, I guess it is at this point.
It does feel like a saga. Well, thanks for having me on. Thanks for reading. Thanks for reading. That's my general sentiment. Thanks for reading.
Cool. Mike, anything you would like to say before we get out of here?
Nah, I don't want you to get mad at me.
It's too late. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. We're fine. Don't worry. And we will see you next week. Have we talked about what the show is? We talked about it 2 weeks ago, but I forget. One thing we do need to talk about is the book club, Mike.
Yeah. Do we know when that show's actually going to be yet?
We don't know, but we have to keep talking about it. We've gotten a couple people emailing about it, and we had somebody come in asking about the book at the shop.
And you have it, right?
And I do have some of the book. So awesome. We have a book club. We're starting out with Randy Mosher's Tasting Beer. We're going to have, as Mike demands he be called, Mosh Dog. We're going to have Mosh Dog on.
Only the most respect for Moj Dog.
Yeah. Kate's holding up the beer. Oh, look at it. And it's got like Post-it notes and stuff in it.
Can I be in your book club?
Yes, absolutely. So the whole idea is read the book. And if you have any questions or comments or anything about the book, or even just like stories about, like for me, it was like that was what I had with me when I was studying for the Cicerone exam, for example, because it would be cool. So feel free to use the letters and e-letters and the addresses that we're going to put in the show notes. And and then we'll do it. And then from there, we'll see where we go. I have a couple ideas. Mike does too, about other books that we can do. But yeah, we're going to do it. I still have to reach out to Randy, which is my responsibility. He'll do it.
Yeah, he'll be here. He'll be great.
We know him. He's cool. He's very cool.
It's like, I'm out of the country for the next 2 years, right? No. Although it
Lives
doesn't
in
matter
Panama
now. I mean,
now.
as Kate shown, we have the technology. The $6 million guest over here. But yeah, so we're doing that. What?
Is that how much we spent on this? $6 million.
Well, I mean, somebody did.
we gotta start
Zoom
that.
spent $6 million.
We gotta start that Patreon.
I assumed I was being paid $6 million to appear, and now I'm confused.
You are, just not by us.
In my Venmo by tomorrow.
Yeah, send the request.
Okay.
But thank you guys again. We'll be on next week with. There's a couple options. It won't be with Mosh Dog, unfortunately. But there's a few other we may do. But until then, we will see you. So long, guys.
Remember this is what we wanted. Remember this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again. Remember this is what we wanted. Remember this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again. Remember this is what we wanted. Remember this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again.